Let me go eat.
I just uploaded.
Okay. What time? Okay.
I'm just chilling.
I'll be there at like 12.
The notes that allow you to come out.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, when you're in your, when I'm looking at my computer, like they're out of order in the questions you asked me.
Yeah,
So like, I couldn't find them, and I was like, oh, shit, I just off the top.
yeah, yeah. I also couldn't see like, I never saw him hold it. I never, so I had no idea what time I was at.
I know, I was like sitting there, and then after, I was like, I didn't know you were there.
No, I was like, I really couldn't see, and I was like, well, hopefully
Yeah,
this isn't that zone.
I think mine was a little bit shorter, but.
I don't like my short babies out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like what time was it? And I was running out of questions. She's good at them.
I asked a question and then I was like looking at my computer and it just said, all right, that's like the time we have. And I was like, oh no, like I don't have any more.
So same, I got my last one. So we were gonna end this.
the best, but hey, George, baby. I'm moving right up with it. With what? Gonna be the- But all right. I know. Yes. I really need to get You guys have some. Yeah. How long is that?
All right, good morning, welcome back. Let's go ahead and get started. And on the nice sunny weather as our backdrop for the day. So today we are getting into feast negotiation theory. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but just a few housekeeping details as we get started. Cole presented last class. We talked about uses and gratification theory on Wednesday. So uses and gratifications theory is one of our big theories related to media. So we talked a lot about mediated theories such as agenda setting theory, uses and gratifications theory, and spiral of silence theory, right? As you're thinking about how we interpret and we use media day to day, how we're using things like our phones, laptops, and other devices. These theories really help us to better understand how this serves as a tool of communication and engagement with one another. To help us to kind of contextualize some of the contrasting perspectives here, uses and gratification is a mass society theory that suggests that media has a large influence over people's lives. How many people say true? How many people say false? So the answer here is false, right? So the reason for this is that there are contrasting perspectives on the role of media in our lives, right? A mass society theory, right, that suggests that media has influence or control over our lives is one that would align more with agenda setting theory. That is, media has the ability to set the stage and decide for us how to engage. But uses and gratification is the flip side. That is, we use media for ourselves to fulfill needs, but ultimately we're the ones with the power, right? Netflix loses subscribers if they don't have content that interests us. You have like YouTube videos where people beg for likes and subscriptions, right? People are the ones who have power insofar as they're the ones who have the ability to impact how people are utilizing media. Today, we'll be talking about faith negotiation theory. This is the theory that gets into the role of culture and applies it in a more interpersonal context, including some of the ways that culture connects to our day-to-day experiences and lives. So faith negotiation theory is shifting a bit more to both culture and interpersonal oriented life. we're gonna have Gavin present. Gavin was not able to join us today, so we'll just kind of go through and talk about these ideas together. But before we get started on that, I went ahead and completed grading and providing feedback on your theory reflection assignments. So those essays, you'll notice that there is both a score out of 100 points, and it also has my written feedback as a paragraph response in the comments. Please let me know if you have any questions about the feedback or grade that you've received on the assignment. But I do want to take the time to give some general feedback, right? I like to use an assignment like this one where you have kind of a shorter, less intensive writing assignment early on, so I can kind of pay attention to what works, give you some feedback going forward that will help to inform your work on the 2 application papers in the course, as well as the final assignment that you'll turn in at the end of the term. So I hope that this feedback is useful for you as you prepare and start to think about this next assignment. So some things that I wanted to point out here. First of all, I thought that you all did a great job of understanding sort of the fundamentals of theory. A lot of people chose social penetration theory or uncertainty reduction theory. And I think people did a good job of showing that they understood kind of in a very general sense what that theory is and what it's talking about, right? That'll be really important as you transition into your application papers. You really want to show, I understand this theory, I'm able to use this theory appropriately. Again, think about the theory as a pair of glasses, right? What assumptions, what beliefs, what perspective are you putting on when you're choosing to use the theory? And I thought that people understood what the theories were getting at well. I thought that overall, the essays were structurally sound, right? You used introduction, body, and conclusion as a way of organizing your points, and I appreciated you all doing that. And I really liked how a lot of essays did a good job of incorporating good, relevant personal examples. Again, the focus of this assignment is on you really trying to explain how this theory was relevant to your own life. So people who were talking about their friend and family relationships, maybe focusing on a particular relationship, I felt like getting into that level of detail and clarity was really good. And I appreciated people taking the time to do that and to connect that with the theory as a whole. So the big thing that I would encourage, again, it's not global, but one thing that I think across the board people can continue to work on, right, is remember that a theory, right, in a general sense is suggesting behavior. For example, uncertainty reduction theory, right, is suggesting how we use communication to reduce our verbal and nonverbal hesitancy or uncertainty to people. One thing that will really help as you transition into your application papers, or if you just find that you're not sure how to fill in the space, is to use the concepts, right? To use the terms and the ideas that are directly coming from the theory. So there were some reflections that talked about the theory in a very general sense, and then just kind of use that as the basis. And I encourage you to dig a little bit deeper. For example, uncertainty reduction theory has various axioms, right, about how we express ourselves more non-verbally as we become more comfortable with one another. As we talked about last class, right, uses and gratification identifies a variety of specific needs that we have fulfilled, for example, easement or escapism, right? So bringing in the specific terms, concepts, and ideas that theories are using is a great way to add depth to your analysis and to help you for the application, right? It's not just that the theory is suggesting an idea, but it's using these terms and it's using these concepts as the building blocks, right? So you have the house, and you're trying to explain how the bricks and the terms that are being used here in the theory are helping you to engage the house. As part of that, continue to work on in-text citations and organization. Again, there were some papers that did that incredibly well, but make sure whenever you are drawing from ideas or concepts from the book that you are including an in-text citation to the book in your response, particularly if you're citing from a specific part of the book, whether it's a paraphrase or a direct quotation, you are going to want to include the page number in that work, and continue to work on organization, particularly when it comes to paragraph structure and length, right? Try to avoid having just like kind of a hanging couple sentences that don't really fit into a paragraph. Combine that into another one, and avoid having paragraphs that are super long. About half a page is good, give or take. At that point, you're generally moving on to a different idea. So continue to work on some of that with regard to structure and organization. But overall, I would say that people did well. I would say the average score on this one was in the B range, probably about 83, 84%. So if you did well, excellent. If not, don't worry, this is not a big part of your grade. I hope this feedback is useful for you as you transition into thinking about and developing your first application paper of the term. I enjoyed getting to know more about you all and seeing you use these theories in action. So I appreciate that. So shifting gears, today we are talking about face negotiation theory, which means that I finally get to share work by authors that are foundational communication that are just like not pictures of old white dudes, which is nice. Face negotiation theory, right, is the idea about face management. In other words, how we are managing our public perception and reputation with other people. If you've taken a course such as interpersonal communication or intercultural communication, you might be familiar with face negotiation theory to an extent, but I do want to take some time to go over this theory in a little bit more detail so that we can understand sort of its assumptions and approaches. So face negotiation theory is based on the idea of face management, right? That we're maintaining our face in social settings, both in terms of self-face, how we understand ourselves, and other face to deal with conflict and challenges for people who come from various cultural backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives. So this is taking a socio-psychological, cultural, and positivistic and empirical look into our relationships, right? There are elements of this that are interpersonal because they're how we're managing our relationships with others. They're also applying to a larger group and cultural setting, right? So it's not only how are we managing our reputation with our relationships close to us, but it's also a question of how we're managing our relationships in group settings. How are we managing our public relationships in a world of media and media connectedness? So this is an important idea to explore here. There's a 2004 film by Alf Wu called Saving Face, which is both very literally, but also theoretically really appropriate here. This is a film that came out that deals with a mother-daughter combo, right? And the mother is kind of dealing with a later in life pregnancy and potential marriage, right? But feels a bit embarrassed to share that information to her daughter, right? And feels discomfort about that because it goes against cultural norms and traditions. Meanwhile, the daughter is having challenges with coming out as a lesbian to her mother, right? And so they're both dealing with some of the cultural issues and ways of portraying oneself in a cultural context that can emerge in face negotiation theory, which is a good example of how culture and reputation can impact our communication. So this face negotiation theory comes from Dr. Stella Ting Toomey. Dr. Ting Toomey is a professor of speech communication at California State University, Fullerton, and comes in from a perspective of trying to understand how we engage in the process of communication with one another across a variety of different cultures and situations. So if you have ever heard the reputation, right, or the expression of saving face before, right, generally speaking, we talk about the idea of saving face as managing your reputation in a difficult scenario. For example, perhaps you have introduced yourself to my partner did this. There's a band you really like, they play a live show, and you're really into the lead singer of that band, and you want to talk to them after the show, but you stumble over your words and you were really embarrassing. And the next time you talk to them at another show, you're going to be much better. You're going to save face and you're going to show that you're not this awkward, stumbling person. We do this in a lot of our relationships, right? Sometimes we feel like we've made a bad impression on somebody else and we want to rectify that. Or sometimes we've said something in an email that was incorrect or phrased poorly and we want to fix it. Or, we've just done like some type of social faux pas. Like a good example of this is, like you realize that you like put a stain on your shirt if you were eating food, or, maybe your button was undone or something like that, right? So it's preserving our reputation, particularly as we deal with something that might be embarrassing, concerning, or threatening to our reputation or credibility. Our ability to deal with a bad situation and to do so effectively. For example, somebody who's dealing with a scandal or issue in a public light is going to be trying to engage and respond in a way that's saving face and reputation. So face negotiation theory brings in a variety of different assumptions. One of them is that our self-identity is important in terms of our interpersonal interactions, right? In other words, we are in constant negotiation in our identities with other people in a social setting. Again, if we think back to some of the fundamentals of things such as symbolic interaction theory, it's the idea that our sense of identity, who we are as people, we know that through communication, and we know that through forming relationships to other people. We know who we are because we know who we're not. We know who we are because we find people similar to us with whom we identify. And face and culture play a really big role in how we manage and deal with conflict. For example, perhaps the house that you grew up in, the setting, and family members and friends had very different approaches to conflict. Perhaps you came from a household where people were yelling all of the time, and it was a very destructive environment, or there was a lot of disagreement, but it was always constructive. People always kind of made up and moved on effectively. Or maybe you grew up in a household where there was generally no conflict, right? Where there was generally not a willingness for people to speak openly about issues that cause disagreement. So depending upon the culture and background you come from, right, the way that you manage conflict and deal with conflict is going to look a little bit different. And as mentioned, right, certain actions that we experience day to day can impact our self-image, how we present and how we appear to other people. That referring, of course, to our use of face. So face is something that exists across a variety of different cultures and contexts. It is, in many ways, thinking about almost like a mask, right, or a way that we present ourselves to other people. You might be familiar with Carl Jung's ideas of collective unconscious, the idea of a persona or mask that we wear. Interestingly, this concept, if you have ever played the series, has actually been integrated in video games. If you've played the Persona series, like Persona 5, which is one of my top 3 favorite games ever, it actually uses the idea of wearing a mask or persona as we present ourselves in social and cultural settings, drawing pretty closely from Jung's concept in social psychology. But face is this idea of how we present ourselves to other people. Another example, in a lot of contexts with regard to mental health, folks who are kind of existing in a variety of neurodiverse, or as they might call it, neurospicy contexts, like to talk about the idea of masking, having a public way that we present ourselves or appear to other people, like performing as normal in a way that goes against how we might feel comfortable sharing and presenting ourselves in other settings. So our use of face as how we present what we think we should be to other people is a good example here of this in action. For example, maybe you have family friends, maybe you're at some type of meet and greet event, you have to present a different version of yourself and highlight yourself in a different way. My partner and I like to joke that whenever I come home from teaching, oftentimes I still have my on voice, and she's like, turn that off. No, you're not working anymore. So sometimes we present ourselves in very different ways in more social and contextual situations. So there are a few concepts here that are useful in understanding and thinking about face and how we manage reputation. One of them being the idea of face concern. So again, if we think about culture and we think about cultural differences, some of the ways that those can be measured, one of the biggest is differences between more individualistic and collectivist cultures, as we'll get to in a minute. But in many cultures, it's seen as not a good thing to have unwanted attention dedicated to yourself. Some of you might feel that, especially if you're more introverted, right? You don't want somebody to pay attention to you or spotlight you. You want to blend in, you want to feel included and a part of the group, and you don't want to stand out in a negative way. You might choose this in the context of your participation, the clothing you wear, maybe a reluctance to respond to a question posed to full class, right? So oftentimes we don't want attention drawn for ourselves, although in more individualistic cultures like the United States, that's something that generally people are more interested in doing. So we have a lot of people, for instance, who might choose to share their perspectives, their thoughts, to be more outgoing, and that's seen as a cultural difference, that we have a desire more to stand up. There's also this idea of face need that connects pretty closely to this too. That is, we can choose to relate to other people on 2 different bases. On the one end, we could do inclusion, right? We want to be a part of the group. I'm just like you. My experiences are very similar to yours. I'm going to blend in, right? Or autonomy, right? That might be to say that your perspective and experience is a little bit different, right? So you might say in a group of people, well, I actually feel a little bit differently. I'm a senior, I transferred here, unlike folks who started in their first year at EOU. And so my perspective isn't quite the same as yours. So oftentimes, especially in group settings, we're dealing with this combination of feelings. We want to blend in and be a part of the group, or we want to stand out and be our own people. So a positive face is the idea that we want to be liked by others, we want to be accepted, and we want to be included, right? Think about this as a survival instinct in group settings. And on the other end, a desire to be autonomous and to be our own people is what's considered to be negative things. I'm going to differentiate myself from the group. In this way, we do what is known as face work, which is not Botox. Instead, it's how we're managing our reputation and relationships with people close to us, right? The idea here is that if our face is a persona, it's a mask, it's something we're taking effort to design and to curate for our specific settings. Here's how I'm going to present myself at an athletic club. Here's how I'm going to present myself to my family. Here is, kind of the classic example. Somebody has brought their partner to visit and have dinner with their family. How is that person presenting in an entirely new setting, right? That's face work. It's how we're keeping our reputation managed in these different situations. One of them is the idea of tact, right? We're tactful insofar as we're respectful of another person's autonomy. We're understanding of where that person is coming from, their experiences, and trying to show our respect for other people. Similarly, we have the idea of solidarity, right? Solidarity is a term that comes a lot in terms of social activism circles. Solidarity, for instance, solidarity in the use of social media, like maybe there's a pin or issue. Like one thing that I always think about is the yellow and blue flag that people did to indicate support for Ukraine, kind of immediately following that invasion, right? That was an example of showing support for someone in an in-group context. And then there's also this idea of approbation, right? This is the idea that when something is coming up like an issue, we're minimizing blame and we're maximizing praise for something. For example, maybe you and a friend are in a class and your friend is giving a presentation and your friend feels like the presentation went horribly. You feel like, oh no, they were unorganized, they didn't have their slides ready. So your friend feels awful about how it went. Rather than say, oh yeah, you did an awful job, right? You might be a good friend and say, well, I thought you were so energetic. I really enjoyed the way that you brought it as an example. You were really conversational, highlighting the good points as a way of really helping that person manage their credibility and again, maintain face and reputation in what might be a very difficult environment. So as we've talked a little bit about in this class, right, the idea of identity and the way that we experience identity is a really complex thing. I'm fond of the classic quotation, the quest for identity is the modern pilgrimage, right? Our experience of trying to understand who we are, the ways that that evolves and changes over the course of our lives. There's a whole lot that goes into that, right? Our experiences growing up with our personality, and sociology, anthropology, psychology. You might be familiar with the idea of nature versus nurture, the environment that shapes us versus the qualities that we might have in our kind of genetics. And so a lot of these different elements that shape who we are coming from our social relationships, right? And we're negotiating who we are relative to others, and through our use of self-image. We think about, okay, what parts of ourselves do we want to share to other people? What do we want to let other people in on? This is something a lot of other theories like social penetration theory get at too. That over time, we're sharing more parts of ourselves. But one thing that makes this different, right, is social penetration theory has this very kind of linear, there's the outside, there's the middle, there's the center, right? There's increasing things that we share about ourselves. But what makes face negotiation theory different is the way that it suggests that our presenting self really differentiates and is maybe not entirely honest or accurate, right? We're going along and we're laughing at our boss's joke, even though it's a terrible joke, right? But we're doing so to maintain a reputation and to be seen as a positive person in the group. And we do what are considered to be both face-saving, preventative measures, and face preservation after the fact measures. One good example is face saving, like putting a napkin in your lap before you eat so that you don't spill. And face preserving is using the restroom if you did spill, if you were eating, right? We take preventative action to manage our reputation with other people. And then after something has occurred, we also will take efforts to try to protect ourselves and protect those around us, right? This is not just about us managing our own reputation, but it's also about how we recognize that people are put in compromising positions, people are put in settings that might be seen as embarrassing or difficult for them, and how we kind of throw them a lifeline to help them out in dealing with their challenges. As mentioned, right, this also closely connects to different styles of managing and dealing with conflict. Because depending upon the culture, group, or background you're coming from, your experiences and approaches to conflict are going to look really different. Some households come to an avoiding approach. We don't talk about our feelings, we don't talk about our problems, right? It isn't that conflict doesn't exist, it's that conflict is not really directly addressed. That can be in a lot more kind of paternalistic, top-down types of cultures in which the leadership, the organization of that family is especially important and seen as sort of what keeps the family together. There's what's known as obliging, right, where people are willing to kind of cave into or acquiesce to the demands of other people. Your sibling really, really, really wants the last scoop of ice cream that's in the freezer. You choose to give it to them and oblige them as a way of dealing with conflict. Compromising, right, meeting in the middle. Sometimes that can be useful, but famously, it makes nobody happy, right? The compromising approach, at worst, it's critiqued as the idea of splitting a baby in half because, well, everybody gets half the baby, but don't have a baby anymore, right? So compromising can be fruitful, it can be difficult, but sometimes there are ways to engage in compromising constructively. I like to use the example of two siblings who want an orange, right? You think, well, there's one orange left, both siblings want it, what are you gonna do? But you take the time to figure out why the siblings want the orange. One sibling wants the orange so that they can use the juice because they want to make orange juice. The other sibling wants the peel because they're going to do a candied orange peel, right? And they can use the same orange and they get to share it, right? But they realize why they're using that. And when we think about compromise and dealing with conflict, understanding the motivations and goals that cause sort of scarce resources or concerns about an issue, sometimes compromise can be a good way to get to that. Dominating, right, is your way, particularly in regards to power. One classic example we see in households is, a kid asking, well, why do I have to take out the trash? And the parent said, because I say so, right? So dominating is having things go your way and oftentimes exerting power to make that happen. And then integrating. As mentioned, integrating is the opportunity to incorporate various ideas and perspectives together. Perhaps you and your roommates are disagreeing over who should do chores, and you have the option of creating a list where different roommates are assigned different chores that fit within things that they're especially good at. So these strategies of managing conflict deal with our idea of face and reputation in social settings. As mentioned, right, individualistic cultures are ones more like the United States and Australia, where there's a greater emphasis on the self and on the personal desire for promoting yourself, for achieving your goals, for speaking more in kind of I language. And whereas more collectivist cultures, including many cultures in Asia and Africa, right, are coming from a greater focus on collaboration. These are also countries and settings that tend to have much higher population density, right? It's a lot more crowded, and as a result, you will likely not stand out as much, and you have a greater need in order to blend in with the group. In other words, other face concern, thinking about and addressing the needs of those around you and managing reputation in those settings is especially important in more collectivist culture situations. So Space negotiation theory does have some critiques. Again, one of them is that individualistic and collectivist cultures don't necessarily respond to space or the ways that we manage or utilize space in the ways that somebody might expect. For example, it's not necessarily that more collectivist cultures are, not standing out as much because there's celebrities, there's famous figures, there's people who are creative, who want to stand out or go against tradition in their own right. And similarly, in more individualistic cultures, there are those that show a lot of concern for others, those who take on a more supportive role in a group. So the line between individualism and collectivism in broad strokes doesn't necessarily get at the nuances of how people manage their reputation through the means of communication. And there are other factors that relate to the role of reputation as well. For example, sometimes taking responsibility and ownership for a problem or issue can actually be a really good and useful strategy. There's actually a pretty successful marketing campaign several years ago where Domino's Pizza basically said, yeah, we know that our pizza is bad and we're going to make it better, right? And surprisingly, it worked. It actually increased their sales and interest in Domino's Pizza. So sometimes managing reputation and saving face in a way to minimize responsibility actually isn't the best approach. And like actually stepping forward and showing kind of honest responsibility taking can be a way of improving your relationships. And how we manage face, how we manage reputation, those are things that are not always easy to measure, right? What does it mean to maintain or manage reputation? Well, that requires an understanding of our human relationships and choices that we make, but that's a very difficult thing for us to like measure and to measure in a very quantifiable or understandable way. So, this is a much more critical, qualitative, in many respects, oriented theory. So it can be difficult for us to try to understand and really apply some of the ways that this theory plays out. So I want to show an example here of the trailer of the Saving Face 2004 film by Alice Wu. I think it does a great job here of discussing sexuality, relationships, identity, and specifically the way that the two women on the show are dealing with a conflict over how they're presenting themselves to each other versus how they really feel about their lives, their identity, and their lived experience. So I'm going to pull that up for you. And as you're watching, pay attention to how this fits within elements of face negotiation theory that we've talked about.
Oregon State residents, if you have a utility meter like this on the side of your house. Oh, come on. I was 8 or 9. The one first time the heck out of them. Who has a surprise for her mother? She only had sex. No, she thinks we conjugate Latin verbs. Her mother. So is not listening.
Seriously, well, why don't you just tell her?
She knows.
She got to set you up with that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Because she has a surprise. What? Where? Up her phone. Baby. She wants to say, I feel you know how I love him. Exactly. You know what kind of high show that they have, the Chinese audience taking on. It's a part of the fairly. My husband was a Chinese guy. He's not very Chinese, but he's rich. Open down. With these their fears. Kitty, right here in front of all these people. And find a way to find each other. Junction. Michelle cruising. Saving.
So it's got the kind of cheesy early 2000s voiceover, but it's kind of fun to see an example of this in action, right? Talking about the kind of Chinese American experience and the ways in which this relationship, like there's the scene right at the dinner table where the two characters are trying to engage with mother, but There's challenges and barriers about explaining that they're together, and that not being understood. The challenge of the mother trying to portray herself in a very clear and authoritative way, but dealing with marriage and pregnancy and trying to figure out how to explain that to her daughter, right? So we see this in a lot of different cultures, settings, and situations, right? The barriers and challenges that come with cultural expectations on how we should behave, how we should relate to each other, versus how we might situate our own identities in that process. Again, I'd cite the recent Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's another really good example about how cultures and generations experience and communicate about themselves to other people. You can see this play out in a lot of different things. So what I would like you to do here is, knowing that we are just over a couple weeks away from your first application paper, I want you to take some time to think about some possible communication artifacts that you could analyze for this assignment. As mentioned, communication artifacts are pieces of communication that you'll be looking at for this application paper, right? Could be films, could be episodes of a television show, focus on an episode rather than a full show, stage productions, songs, speeches or public addresses, advertisements, books are another option if there is a book or text that you're especially interested in. So feel free to share or jot down the ideas that maybe have been floating in your head over the last few days, or ideas that come to mind as we've been talking about some of these concepts in the course. Then after that, think about which theories from the course particularly stand out to you as possible candidates to use for this essay. So I'll give you some time to think about and write this on your own. This will be part of your attendance that you'll be turning in just a little bit. once you've finished thinking about these ideas, I'd like you to find a partner or group of three and take some time to share some of your possible ideas, either for the artifacts or the theories that you're using. And as you're talking and sharing together, take note about any feedback you have. How might somebody define the artifact a bit more? Maybe there's a theory that's a better fit. What do you find interesting about their ideas? Or which of their ideas that they're deciding between do you think might be the best fit? So once you're ready, take some time to chat with somebody else in the course about some of these things.
Yeah, and then also
Nice.
I've never seen a game.
The game and art is pretty cool. Then you transfer.
No minor.
You have to get everybody. Last year, no, it's just like, yeah. Oh, I didn't get to any lot. I don't know why you use it for that. Another one, I'm sure. Yeah. I really don't. I feel bad. I gotta wait. I only. But we not at the FD. That's good. Have you got that before? But I didn't mind. I mean, I saw that maybe we have, and then you start with an essay, it doesn't say. Yeah, I've been part of all. I'm not. And so, yeah,
Take a couple more minutes to share.
it's,
First come, first served. I did it.
Just.
Okay, go ahead and wrap up your current discussion or thought. As we come back together, I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but if there anybody who has an idea they're especially interested in, excited about, or would like to share, or a germ of an idea you're thinking about. It's Friday, we want to get outside. I get it. But I did really enjoy hearing some of the ideas you all were sharing. For example, a couple of people talking about reality TV shows, some people talking about books, literature they're especially interested in. So, you've got plenty of time to continue to explore these ideas and develop them further, but I do want to encourage you to continue to brainstorm and think about these. So to wrap up for today, continue to think about and develop those ideas. Again, I'm happy to chat with you if you have questions about ideas for your first paper and want to discuss further. Talked about face negotiation theory and how we deal with our reputation and public presentation with others. Next week, we are moving over to communication privacy management theory. So look forward to that. Please pass forward or email me your attendance for the day if you haven't done so already. Have a good weekend, enjoy the outdoors, and I will see you again on Monday.